everybody, welcome to my channel. Today we are going to talk about imaginary friends. I'm Rita and today it's all about you. Imaginary friends are a psychological phenomenon that friendship or other kind of relationships happened only in the creativity of a person. In this case, we are talking about children. So it's something that it's not real, and it's something that it doesn't exist only in the mind of the person. They seem very real to the creator, but usually children knows that this friend doesn't really exist. An imaginary companion can be a product of children's creativity, but they help children with self-confidence in the social environment, self-motivation and emotional regulation. Usually it can start between 2, 3, 4 years old, and it's normal that goes until 10 or 12 years old. Sometimes these imaginary friends can go until adulthood and be a companion for the teenager, but it's not so usual. The way children play usually is with imagination. So they just create situations and they are going through these situations using their own response and these imaginative ways of coping with these situations. But some kids go a little bit further and they just don't create these situations. They create people and friends that they can play with. Usually these kind of imaginary friends, they can be human, or they can be animals, or they can be any other kind of creatures that the children create. The children create this kind of imaginary friends because they are bored, or they are alone, or they just want somebody different to play with, and with these imaginary friends they can have always a fun play, and it could always be fun for them to have a little time playing with these imaginary friends. It's not accurate to assume that children with no siblings are the ones that create these imaginary friends. Usually any kind of children with or without siblings can create imaginary friends, and it's also a myth to assume that they create it because they feel terribly alone. It's not the truth. The children can eventually feel that they want somebody else to play, or they want to play in their own way, and that's why they create these imaginary friends. Actually, having an imaginary friend is a symptom that your child is developing social intelligence. These kids usually they grow up and they become much more creative adults. The funny part is that usually boys have male companions and girls have both genders. In these situations, kids are much more competent because they have roles of leadership and they can play pretend being a role model or being a leader, something that sometimes it's not possible when they play with real children. Usually these kind of children are much more independent, and these situations can promote autonomy in the children because they imagine situations where they have a problem and they have to solve that problem. So this is something that can be in the future very positive for your kid development. All these experiences gave to your child some life lessons that he will learn and that he will take to his own future. Usually these kids can easily give to their parents the real idea of how their minds work, and can really help in certain skills. For instance, they can be much more communicative, they can be less shy, they can have better social skills, can be much more empathic, much more creative, and they usually have higher cognitive skills. On the other way, in a much more different and serious approach, this can give to the parents and to professionals early signs when it's the cause of schizophrenia or paranoia, something that we will talk a little bit ahead. But sometimes having an imaginary friend is not a good sign, particularly when there are certain situations that the children or the child is not able to cope. When a child uses an imaginary friend to cope with a traumatic experience, and he can just stay in this spiral of different behaviors, or if this imaginary friend starts to bully the child, say bad stuff, make him feel down about himself. Another bad sign is when the child refuses to take responsibility. So when the child says that everything that happens it's not his own behavior, and his behavior has nothing wrong because the wrong behavior is from his imaginary friend. When a child prefers an imaginary friend than a real friend, this is something that it's not okay, and this is something that can give a red flag to the parents, because it means that it's something wrong with the social skills of these children or this child, and it means that there's some kind of anxiety, social anxiety about the reality, and imaginary friends are the ones that these children can cope with, and only the ones that they can cope. Another bad sign is when the imaginary friends kind of models the behavior of a child. So when a child starts to behave in a different way, when he starts to do something that it's not okay, and that even can put him in dangerous, and he keeps saying that it is his imaginary friend that make him do this. This is something that it's not okay, and it's something that the parents should be alert. When a child says that his imaginary friend is telling him things that are not pleasant, when the child says that he has voices in his head, and these voices it's from imaginary people, and they are saying bad things and malicious things that bothers him, this is something that it's not okay and can lead to these symptoms that we were talking about, paranoia and schizophrenia, which are very serious, particularly with children. Here in the channel I always try to tell you what is a normal behavior or the most common behavior and what is not so normal. And when I say it's not so normal, sometimes there are behaviors that they just can be red flags for parents and eventually for physicians who can help the children change this kind of behavior, or eventually can understand why the children are having this behavior. This kind of behaviors of a children having imaginary friend is something that is healthy, it's something that it's okay, it's something that parents can learn to cope with, and only in very special occasions or situations you can think about red flags, and you can think about any other things that can develop symptoms of some kind of mental disease. Anyway, I always recommend, if you have doubts and if you don't feel comfortable about some kind of behavior of your child, go to a pediatrician and ask him questions, and ask him what tell him what are your concerns, and he will possibly tell you what can happen to your child, and what is normal behavior, and what is something that both of you have to seek for another kind of help. Play along, don't be too nervous, don't be too anxious about this behavior. This is usually a phase, and it just usually shows how creative your child is. On the other way, imaginary friends sometimes can help you start a conversation with your child. Sometimes children, when they are small, they don't like to talk much, or they don't really know how to express themselves, and talking about his imaginary friend is something that can help your child coping with all the situations, and at the same time it's a way of developing certain aspects of feelings, of words, and helping your kid to have to learn how to have a conversation. Sometimes it's not very common, but sometimes these imaginary friends can go until adulthood. It's something that the kids just stay with. Again, it doesn't mean anything particularly bad, and if it's on these healthy terms, I don't think you should be much concerned about this situation. Having an imaginary friend, it doesn't mean that your kid is suffering from a mental disease or a disorder. It's something that is just a creative process, and if you follow these tips, you can easily understand what are the benefits of having imaginary friend for your kid. So that's all for today, guys. I hope you like it. I hope you subscribe to the channel. I hope you leave a thumbs up. I hope you share with a friend, and I'll see you next time for another video. Bye!